The BMC Amy Z Talk and CompuWare Modern Mainframe podcasts have joined forces. You can find your favorite episodes from both podcasts, as well as new insight and discussion at soundcloud.com/modern mainframe. CompuWare is now BMC CompuWare, providing a complete app dev toolkit which enables you to make the mainframe as adaptive as any other platform and start your journey to becoming an autonomous digital enterprise with a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Dallaire. Joining us to answer some questions in today's fIveQ episode is CompuWare User Experience Engineer Barbara Datz-Hernandez. Thanks for joining us, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. So we talk a lot about software design and delivery on the podcast, usually from management or a developer standpoint, but I'm really interested to get your opinion on a few things. So I'll ask you a few questions and get started.
Sounds great.
You have a unique perspective working behind the scenes, looking at things from an end user point of view. What do you see as the most important issue in mainframe development today?
Well, I think we talk about it, in terms of organizations, but I think this really impacts developers as end users, is organizational apathy. So even though organizations are powered by mainframes, their core business logic lives there. So you're using a mobile banking app, but it's powered by the mainframe.
Right.
Because they're so powerful, the mainframe systems. They're faster, reliable, more efficient. But organizations don't invest in it, not just financially, but in their IT organizations, modernizing, becoming agile. I was just looking through some research results we had on our product Expediter, and they talk about, how essential that is to help them understand the programs and debug. But if organizations aren't investing in tools like that, that help improve delivery and provide business value sooner, providing this modern tool set, it makes it hard for developers because mainframe programming is complicated and it doesn't have to be complicated or hard. And it can be delivered incrementally, but organizations are not necessarily focusing on that. I think COVID has changed that a little bit, but the more organizations can work towards that sort of modern delivery mechanism, it brings greater value to customers and job satisfaction to developers as well.
UX has been a bit of a buzzword in recent years. Can you give us a brief description of what's involved, especially on the mainframe?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily different from the mainframe to other platforms.
Right.
We don't tend to focus on the UX of the mainframe in a lot of cases because there's not that many people that interact with the green screen user interface.
Right.
They're more involved in GUI front ends, whether it's web-based or mobile-based or a desktop application. But UX generally encompasses a number of disciplines that impact how people interact with and experience products and services. So what you see on your screen, computer screen, car, phone, refrigerator, they're all based on the information they contain, how it's structured, and how it's presented. That includes the visual design, the stuff that you see, the controls that you use, like buttons, knowing where you should type or if you should type, and how to move from place to place within a system or application. All this is working towards making your life better, hopefully.
Right.
And the idea is to make using software or a product as natural as using something like a light switch. So you can concentrate on doing your job or doing your task, as opposed to working on how to make the software work. So you don't have to know about electricity, wiring, or conduit to turn on a light. It's just there.
Right.
But sometimes you have to know a lot about the inner workings of other systems to use related software. And that's very true for our mainframe developers. They have to know a lot about sort of the inner workings of the code in order to do their job on the other end.
So how do you measure or intuit what our customer experiences are?
Well, there's a few ways that we do this. One is through interviews. That helps us clarify the problem being solved. Another is direct observation of people using a product or performing a set of tasks with like working software or prototype.
Okay.
There's a lot of subtlety in how people actually use a product that help us learn more about how to better support their work. And 3 to 5 interactions or observations, we can see patterns of use and where we can improve a design and whether we've got it right. And even just this process of creating the model, creating the mock-up or the prototype helps us understand better how it should work. And it allows us to collaborate product management, user experience, and engineering to make a design better. Sometimes we use surveys. We listen to customer feedback from other sources, like our field staff, customer support, customer councils. We also share sprint demos to get feedback. And then we have a product called Z Advisor that gives us insights, analytics into what's being used within a product. But by far, this direct observation I mentioned is the most informative way of understanding the experience.
How do you set up this direct observation, or what are the circumstances around it? Do you ever visit customers or have them come in, or how does that work?
Well, yeah, we could have people come in or we would go visit them, and we had plans for that, and then the world turned to COVID. So
Right.
we do a lot of it. We do a lot of it remotely. And we could obviously do that in the past as well. But right now we'll set up like a Teams call or a WebEx, depending on how it's best to interact with the particular customer. And then we ask them to do a series of tasks, or we might ask them to show us how they work with a particular area of the interface, and just kind of talk through how they use it and what kinds of things they do with an interface.
So where does UX fit into the process of product or feature planning and development, especially in an agile environment? At which point does it most fit in? I'm sure there's consideration throughout, but at which point does it really play a role?
So there's a like you said, there's a bunch of different ways, and there's different methodologies. There's design a sprint ahead, which if anyone's familiar with the UX agile conundrum, is something that gets talked about a lot. There we can do formative research where we're really trying to understand the problem as opposed to diagnosing what we need to improve in an interface. Design-driven development, things like that. But at CompuWare, the UX engineers are part of the product management team. And so we have an opportunity to know what's on the docket for current and upcoming sprints and our quarterly releases. And it gives us an opportunity to work with not only the product management team, but also engineering. And this is really important in Agile because Agile software development focuses on the delivery of value, so working code and delivered software. But Agile is really only a small part of a design process. It's just focusing on delivering value. And a lot of times we'll jump into writing code prematurely. So I tend to champion a design process that it's from AIGA, the American Institute of Graphic Artists, that we refer to as the 12 red boxes, that focuses, and Agile focuses on box 9, which is that delivering of value. So in order to reduce waste, which is a big problem with Agile software development, developing the wrong thing because we misunderstood something,
Right.
We try to bring a little bit more into sort of the front end of understanding the problem. So what is the problem? How can we achieve victory? How can we model a problem? How can we model software that helps us understand that we're solving the correct problem and nailing the job for the customer?
And what tools do you use when you are planning or designing?
There's a number of different tools, and sometimes it's not important the tool, but rather the job that it performs. But we create mock-ups and prototypes with things like Wireframe Sketcher, which can be used as an Eclipse plugin, so we can use the IDE that our developers use. Lucid Charts gives us more visually rich prototypes like web pages, or InVision if we want interactive prototypes. We use Jira for issue tracking and backlog management, and that's how we collaborate with product management and engineering. We use Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey to develop surveys. screen capture and screen recording. We use to share ideas and prototypes. We use Snagit and Camtasia. So just a number of different tools depending on what we're trying to learn, what team we're trying to work with, and who we need to collaborate with.
So those are the 5 questions, but I have a couple of bonus questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
If you were talking to somebody in the mainframe space, what question would you or do you ask them?
So I kind of think about more like my central points of inquiry in terms of research are what keeps you from editing code and what requires you to go back to the green screen. So I use ISPF or 3270. And that's really, and I might ask like different questions depending on what they're doing, but that's really what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Is what makes editing code hard. And then when do you have to go back to the green screen out of a modern tool? And my favorite question is always, could you tell me more about that?
I'm sure. Okay, so one final question. What was the last book that you read?
So the last book that I was reading for work is called Engineering the Digital Transformation by Gary Groover. And it really talks about moving from like old time waterfall software development into Agile and how we do that and how we become, like all organizations become digital organizations.
Right. So I know I said that was the last question, but when you read books, do you prefer digital versions or hard copies?
It kind of depends. If I'm reading something for pleasure, I'll often I'll read a digital version because I don't want to. I don't know. Books have this affordance, this way that you can use them. A physical copy, I called it find by flipping, so you can just kind of through the book and find the page you're looking for. It's harder to do in a digital copy, but if I'm reading like a novel or something, then I'll read it online.
Yeah, where you're just kind of going straight through and not necessarily having to.
Yeah, I don't need to reference it later.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Interesting. Well, the whole thing is very interesting, so I'm glad to have gotten the chance to talk to you about it. Thanks for joining us. Do you have any last words? Put you on the spot.
I think for all organizations that, understanding your user's experience and understanding how and when to make changes and spending and it's not really any more time, it's just different time, and understanding that the job of a developer is not just writing code, but doing some of the back work, the things that come before what I was referring to as box 9, where you're just jumping into creating value, but really doing that work before that to better understand the problem and do some modeling and prototyping so that you can nail the job, I think is very important for all organizations.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody listening. To hear more fIveQ episodes or any of our other Modern Mainframe podcasts, you can visit soundcloud.com/modernmainframe. You can also find them, of course, on your favorite podcast app. So we'll see you next time on the Modern Mainframe. And until then, take care. The BMC Amy Z Talk and Copyware Modern Mainframe podcasts have joined forces. You can find your favorite episodes from both podcasts, as well as new insight and discussion at soundcloud.com/modernmainframe. Copyware is now BMC Copyware, providing a complete app dev toolkit which enables you to make the mainframe as adaptive as any other platform and start your journey to becoming an autonomous digital enterprise with a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain.